Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. In this one I want to talk about my recent new pet project, Chamfer stops, and I will do that by showing you a uMap that I've been working on, and you can apply all the stuff that I'm going to show you on the uMap for your own project. There's a couple of new features on uMap which you might not have seen yet if you haven't used uMap in a while, and they're super handy, and some of them might not actually be new, they're just new to me, meaning that I hadn't encountered them before. They might have been there for a while, but there are certainly a couple of new features that I will try to cover in this video. So chamfer stops, you will probably be wondering what that is, because most people I've told about this mentioned it too haven't a clue what it is, and that's fine. It's a very, very, very niche subject, and you've probably seen them, but probably didn't know what they're called and that there are different types, and that's completely fine. So chamfer stops are the decorative ends of chamfers, and chamfers are the, to use a similar word, it's not the same meaning, but beveled corners of buildings or in furniture or in building corners or other architectural features. Doesn't have to be buildings, could be just parts of buildings or baptismal fonts or what you could call maybe church furniture. I don't know, like piscinas and tomb niches and stuff like that. I don't know what that is called. But they're parts of churches, but they're not necessarily part of the building, but they're stuff that is in a church. So maybe church furniture is a way of calling them. I don't know what it's called. So there are different types, and they're very, very, very under-researched as well. There have been studies in England. I came across this project here online, which was one of the first results when I typed in chamfer stops into my search. And they looked, it's the Gloucestershire Dendro project, so that means they looked at chamfer stops in wood, which has the great advantage of being able to be dated by counting tree rings, or using dendrochronology, which is the fancy word for it. And you can look at that. I will link that in the description. So they have a couple of examples here, and because they were able to date them, they could figure out that certain stops went out of fashion after a while. So the stops flat step here went out of fashion around the 1530s, and then new ones came in and so on. And we can't really date them that well in stone in Ireland, because you can't count tree rings in stones, obviously. What you could do, which is also, as far as I know, under-researched, is looking at the tool marks, because the way stonemasons worked a stone changed over the Middle Ages and later on, and by analysing the tool marks, if we had a timeline for those, we could also then in turn date the chamfer stops. But it's kind of, at the moment, a bit of circular argumentation. So sometimes we might actually know when the building dated from already from other sources, and then we can say, okay, the chamfer stops were on this building part, so they must be from this kind of a time. Buildings like churches, for example, saw a lot of changes over the time, with, you know, new fashions coming in and other fashions dying out. Same with tower houses, for example. I haven't looked at a lot of tower houses, really only one. From the inside, I have looked at some of the outside, but there's not a lot left to be looking at. So it's really early stages, but I'm trying to collect a catalogue or a database of chamfer stops in Ireland, mostly in County Kilkenny, obviously, because that's where I live and that's where I have access to. But if I go to other places, I will have a look, and if someone wants to help me and send me pictures and stuff, they can do that. And I'm cataloguing them in a certain way, and I'll show you that. They give good reasons here why to look for them, and some of the chamfer stops are the same in wood as in stone. For example, these ones I have found, so they're all kind of sideways in this illustration. So pyramid stops I have found, and converging stops I have found, and I have also found run-out stops. I have found run-out stops in stone and in wood, but I haven't really looked at a lot of wood because not a lot of it survives. And some of them also survived until like Georgian times. but the high time for chamfer stop seems to have been late Gothic, early modern times. Converging stops, for example, seem to have been in fashion, and I don't want to give too much away because maybe I will publish about this at some point, but they seem to be in fashion at the end of the 15th, early 16th century, for example. In stone, I don't know about wood, because as I said, I haven't really looked at a lot. And then they have some here from the 17th century. I can't really say that I have seen many of those. I have seen curved bar stops, especially on fireplaces. And they might well have been 17th century, I don't know. Very few fireplaces are dated, unfortunately. There are some, but not the ones that have curved bar stops, so I don't know. Anyway, so that's already going too deep into it, maybe. If you want to read up on this, please do. I have created Wikidata entries for a couple of the types. Another problem is also that because there's so little research, there isn't even a consensus of what to call them. This website here quotes an article from 1971 where they already say, there is no consensus on what to call them, so they just gave them numbers in this 1971 article. But I'm trying to give them names because it's easier to talk about them than giving them numbers. It's just, it's not in human nature to refer to things by numbers, I think. And for example, I've mentioned the pyramid stop here earlier. There is another type that is called brooch stop. Well, I think it's a different type, but I've talked to an archaeologist, an Irish archaeologist, and she said no, that's the same. But if you look at them closely, they are different shapes, so I think they should be called something different, and they might also date to different periods in time, and then especially they should be named something else. And then you have slightly longer ones, or taller, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, and I've seen them referred to as spear stops somewhere, so I'm calling them spear stops. If you imagine the Cheops pyramid in Egypt, it has a certain height to width or depth ratio, and I would call that a pyramid. But if they are a lot taller than they are wide or deep, I would call that a spear. And maybe I can show you examples of where you can see the difference. I'm photographing a lot of them, not all of them, because I want to upload the images to Wikimedia, and I don't want to overwhelm Wikimedia with the photographs, especially when it's, it's the same building and it has 12 of the same stop somewhere. So I'm only going to photograph one or two. So when you type in chamfer stop into Wikimedia now, you find a lot of my photographs. Let's go through some of them. So this one here, for example, is a plain stop. So they usually just refer to as like adjective plus stop, but to make them easier to find, I've sometimes called the file plain chamfer stop or whatever chamfer stop. So they're just basically, you have the chamfer here and you just cut straight in a diagonal line. You cut down, and it could be different angles, but that's a plain stop. That's probably the easiest to do for a stonemason as well. Now, not that I would know because I'm not a stonemason. And then, for example, here we have one of those run out with bar stops. It's a bit damaged. A lot of them are damaged, which makes it even more difficult to analyze. But there's a curve here. It's a bit difficult to see. But that's a difference to the plain stop, which just goes in an angle straight down or diagonally down. But the run out stop goes down in a curve. And then we have, for example, so this one is what I would call, I called it a pyramid stop, but I have revised my terminology since, and I would now call it probably a spear stop, because if it only went up to here, roughly, I would call that a pyramid stop. But if it's like twice the height it is wide, let's say, or even higher, then I would call it a spear. Spear. Let's see if there's another one. So that is more of a classical pyramid stop. I hope you can see what I mean. All the shapes are cut in half diagonally because they're cut in half by the chamfer, so to speak. This one seems to be fairly common in the 15th and 16th century in doorways and in window mullions, it's a diagonal cut stop, for example. Some of them have bars, as you can see in the images, and some of them don't have horizontal bars. Here, for example, is a spear stop in a window, in a mullion, so you can see the angle is quite different to a pyramid stop. So those are the different types. And I've mostly looked at ones at the bottom of a building, but of course the chamfer goes, if it's not in an arch, it goes all the way up. And then there could be one at the top of a building as well. Or not the top of the building, but the top of the chamfer, which is more difficult to see. So I might have missed a couple, or they're a bit difficult to analyze as well because they're so high up, and I haven't gotten myself binoculars, which I should. Anyways, so these are the ones, so 244 now on Wikimedia. And here we have my uMap. So umap.openstreetmap.fr is a platform, a French platform, but it does work in English as well, where you can create your own map with lots of different background maps to choose from. Very different from Google Maps. And it's not very good with aerial imagery background because there is not a lot of open aerial imagery available globally. So a lot of them are, most of them, if not all of them, if they're not aerial imagery, are based on OpenStreetMap data. So this is the map I've created, and I've chosen this background, kind of a pale grayscale background, so you can see the colors better. I have 290 points here, POIs, which doesn't necessarily mean I only have 290 chamfer stops, because a lot of them come in pairs or even in fours. If it's a mullion, for example, it could have chamfer stops on all four sides at the bottom. They usually don't have them at the top because the windows tend to be arched. So there was probably 300 to 350 chamfer stops by now. And you can see they're mostly in County Kilkenny. I have a few where I've found 3D models on Sketchfab, mostly by, where is he? This account here. Archaeological Survey of Ireland. That's someone who works for the National Monument Service, and he has 847 models, 3D models that he has made using photogrammetry. A lot of them are gravestones, but there's also a lot of churches and stuff like that. And they have been very useful for me. So if you find them further away, they might be because I found stuff in his models where I could figure out which chamfer stop it was. So I have them all color coded, and one of the new things I found out on uMap is that you can do that now. You can color code them by one of the values in your table. So maybe I'll show you the table first. I have two layers. I have one for the chamfer stops and one for internal walls, which is not visible at the moment, but you can turn that on and off here at the right, because sometimes it's important to know where the internal walls is to place the chamfer stops on the map. So I have added that as well. So if we go into the table here, we have a name, which is usually, should be a 2-letter abbreviation for the county, which I haven't been consistent with, as usual. Then the town name, townland name, and the kind of the building name. And sometimes I skipped the town or townland name if it's like Moyne Church, for example. The Moyne is already the townland or the parish, so I didn't put Moyne Church. But sometimes I did, like for example, stuff in Kilkenny town, city. You'll have KK for County Kilkenny, the town Kilkenny, and then the name is Kilkenny Castle, for example. So that's the name. Then we have a description. I usually use Osmond when I go around and track all the chamfer stops, and that's what I put in the description field, and then I can extrapolate all the information into all the other fields. But I leave the description there because it's easier to read than the table format. Then the county, that's not really that important. And then we have the stop shape. So that's the chamfer stop shape. And then whether they have a bar or not, a horizontal bar. I found one where it didn't have a bar, but like a ball, like a half ball or a half globe or whatever you call it. I think I put ball in that field then. And sometimes they're damaged and it's hard to tell whether there is or was a bar or not. And then after having been doing this for 2 weeks or so, I decided that I should probably measure the width of the chamfer, because that might be important. I don't know. I just have to get as much information as possible and see whether it leads anywhere in the end. The material, because I live in Kilkenny and most of the buildings I look at are made from limestone, that's the predominant material, but I have found a couple granite ones and sandstone ones. Sandstone ones obviously don't survive very long, and because that's the material used in the very early Norman churches, those are the oldest bits of the church, and because of that they're even less likely to have survived in pristine condition. So that's not going to be very helpful. Then I have a category that's called architectural structure, and that can be different types of doors. So a door external is a door in a church where you enter the church basically, or a house or some sort of building. It's the door that leads in and out of the building from the street basically, like the main door, so to speak. Obviously some churches have more than one door externally, but they are all external doors. And then I have some that lead to cloisters. I haven't looked at a lot of cloisters because there are not a lot of surviving cloisters in County Kilkenny with doors with chamfer stops, but I thought that might be a category that might be interesting at some point. I don't know yet. I won't go through all of them. Internal doors are doors inside a building. Sometimes because of all the changes that a building went through, I can't really tell whether it was an internal door or an external door, because it might have been once an external door and then they put an extension to the church or whatever, and then it became an internal door. So that's a bit tricky. And then they might have demolished that building part again, and now it looks like it's an external door again, or whatever. So then if I don't know, I'll just put in door or door unknown or something like that. Internal arch is usually the arches between the nave and the south or north aisle or the crossing tower. The pillars of the crossing tower can have chamfer stops on them. So that's what I put as internal arch. Piscina is self-explanatory. Tomb niche, I haven't found that many tomb niches with chamfer stops, but that would be another category. So this is architectural structure. Then I have the building level, because some of them might have been, if you're paying a stonemason to put chamfer stops on your mullions or wherever, you want people to see them. But if it's a second floor window, people from the street level might not be able to see it. So there's not much point in putting chamfer stops on the outside because people can't see it anyway. But on the inside, especially when it's like a reception room or something like that, or like a state room or something where you bring your guests and you want to show off your wealth and how much money you paid your stonemasons, then you might want to put more decorative chamfer stops on the inside of the windows. So that's why I think maybe it's important which building level they're on. And then I have building type and the architectural style. I don't have that a lot because I don't have a lot of dates for them. Tool marks, so that's, won't go into that too much, but vertical tooling, diagonal tooling, claw tooling, or whatever like that. Because if that was researched properly in Ireland, you could date the stones by the tool marks like you can in England. And then an approximate date. Some of them, as you can see here, are not medieval at all. But for some of the later medieval buildings, I do have dates or rough dates. And then sometimes we even know which stonemason it was, or we can presume that it was a stonemason. Usually that's just O'Tony and Kilkenny. And for some of the later ones, we have the name of the architect as well. But that's really a period I don't really want to look into. But some of the buildings have so many building phases from the Middle Ages to Georgian times that, I'm just going to put them into the database just in case. And then we have a Wikimedia link of that chamfer stop. the SMR number of the building usually. Or if it is, let's say, a baptismal font that has its own SMR number, or some other structure that has its own number, then I'll put that in. Some of them also have a National Inventory of Architectural Heritage number, which is also run by the National Monument Service, and I'll put that in under NIAH. They're buildings after 1600, but they can also be buildings or structures that are dated wrong by the National Monument Service. I have one example of that already. And then the Sketchfab URL is the link to my 3D scan, or if I find someone else's 3D scan that is helpful, that is on Sketchfab, I'll link that there. And then the Wikidata of the building, or again, if it is a baptismal font that has its own Wikidata entry, I'll link that. And then notes, which I haven't used a lot. So that's basically the structure of my database. Maybe, I'm not sure. I was debating whether to add religious order as well, but I don't really think it made a difference. I might be wrong, of course, but can always add that later on. And that's also often information that you would find on Wikidata already, hopefully. Anyway, I was also debating whether to add internal or out-facing structure, especially with the mullions, but it's getting very complicated then. So that is, anyway, that's the database structure. What you can do then to color code them is, when you go manage layers, there is a field now that's called conditional style rules. And what you can do there, I'm just going to pretend I'm adding a rule. You can add your key and value. So my key, in this case, I've color coded them by their shape, which should be obvious. So the key for that is stop shape, if you remember that from the table. And then you can say equals and then whatever the shape is. I won't do that now. And then you can give it the rule a name and choose a color, and you can choose all kinds of things here. You don't have to do this for chamfer stops. You could do, like, I was debating to do this whole video on bus stops. So maybe you wanted to highlight bus stops with a shelter. If you used an OpenStreetMap data set, the key would be shelter. So it's shelter yes or no. And you could, I don't know, say shelter yes, and then give it a green color, and shelter no is a red color, or whatever. Or even use different shapes and symbols and all these things you can use to format your markers, which I can't go into now, it's already getting too long, but I have made other videos for uMap, and I'm sure there's lots others. So that's one of the new things that you can do, is the conditional style use. What you can also do is, under manage fields, and I don't know how old or new that is, I haven't noticed it before, is determine the order in which you want these things to be displayed in your form, so to speak. So this is kind of what I've come up with. It's the same, I think it's the same order as in the table, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Because you might start your table and then think, oh, I should probably add this sort of a field, this column, and then it ends up in your table as the last column, I think. Or maybe it's alphabetical. I think it's alphabetical, actually. Yeah. But if you don't want it to be alphabetical, you can move them around here. You see these little thingies that you can move up and down. And you can also add new fields there. For this one, I've chosen the pop-up content style table. There are issues with that. For example, if you remember, I added the Wikimedia link, and if I open this now, I won't do it yet, it will only show it as a link, whereas if I had used the, what's the other one? The default, I could have defined it that it would embed the photograph, which would be nicer, but that doesn't seem to be possible in the table content style. It'll just take the key from the table and just show them in a table, basically. There's no fancy formatting there. You can't do, as far as I'm aware, you can't do like italics or bold or anything like that, which you can do in the default pop-up. And then you could also define the content, how it is presented in this pop-up content template, which I can't do. It doesn't work in the table version. And there's lots of other things that you can set up, which I won't go into. So in my case, yellow means I haven't determined the shape, which can be because the photograph I found online is not quite clear, or I've just seen it through a locked gate and I can't quite figure out from afar what it is, or even when I have gotten close up to it, it's so damaged that I can't tell what shape it was originally. Yeah, I think those are the cases. And white is no chamfer stop, just to show that I've looked at the structure and determined. I haven't done that everywhere, but just to show myself, for whoever, that there could have been potentially a chamfer stop, but they decided to go with plain chamfers all the way through, down or up. Alright, this one here, for example, in St. Mary's Church, former St. Mary's Church, now Medieval Man Museum, there are 2 chamfer stops on either side of the doorway, but before they opened it as a museum, they had decided to raise the floor level about, I want to say, maybe 10-15 centimeters, and the floor is now half covering the chamfer stops. So all I can see is that they had a bar. I can say what shape they are not. I can exclude some of them, but I can't exactly tell which shape it is, which is really unfortunate because there are not a lot of medieval chamfer stops left in St. Mary's Church, and the 2 that are in the building, they've decided to cover up. Because again, nobody's done research on this before, probably, or not enough, so there's not enough awareness. Let's go for maybe here. That's Shee's Almshouse in Kilkenny. You can see we have 3 different colours. Blue is diagonal cut, so get that a lot on, as I said, on window mullions, but also on doors. So this one, for example, see the name up here, so it's in County Kilkenny. The town is Kilkenny, and the building is the Shee's Almshouse, and it's number 1. And then we have the county, which is not really that important. I just thought because the HEV has that, I should have that too. Then we have a description. The stop shape is diagonal cut. It has no bar. I forgot to measure the chamfer width. The material is limestone. The architectural structure is window mullion. It's on the ground floor. The building type is a poor house. The architectural style is Tudor. I don't think there are any tool marks, and the date is not an approximate date, it's the date the building was built, is 1582. I don't know who the stonemason was or the architect. And we have an image here. I might just click on that. It would be nicer if that was integrated into the pop-up, but you see there are 2 diagonal cut stops on either side of the window mullion. And then the SMR number for Shee's Almshouse, sketch fab URL, and in this case I scanned the whole window, because why not? So I don't think there are any discernible tool marks on the mullion. There are clearly ones on the window jambs, but yeah, I probably shouldn't transfer that information onto the mullion, so I didn't. And the Wikidata of the building is that. So that's what the map looks like when you just open it up. I won't link it in the description because there's so much information already that I've gathered, and I don't want anyone to download it and make their own publication from it, so sorry about that. One of the powerful things you can do is filters. So when you open it, let's just refresh, I don't know, better save and refresh. So when you open it up, it gives you the legend, and I should be able to put them in an order that I want. It doesn't quite work. And I'm kind of running out of colors, considering that some people are colorblind. It's a bit tricky, but it's only a work in progress. I'm hoping to do this on the proper website at some point. And then you can close that, and here's the filters, and you add the filters. If you go back into your table, let's say there's not much point filtering by description, but for example, if I wanted to be able to filter by the stop shape, which makes a lot of sense. You just go onto the three dots here, and then it would say add filter for this column. Because I've already done this, it only gives me the option of remove filter for this column, which I don't want to click. You can also rename the column and delete the column. That's not very fancy. Yeah, I already have added quite a few filters. Yeah, for example, material I haven't added a filter to, so if you click on that, it'll say add filter for this column, and I could do that, which I won't do now, but that's an option. And they're all over here. So you have the three layers here, and when you click on that, it opens this window, and you have the filters here. The first one I created, and I think the order it's shown here is the order you've created it in. So you might want to think about it first before you create all the filters, which of course I didn't do because I didn't know. But for example, if I just zoom out, of course there'll be overlays and you won't see a lot of them, or maybe I'll zoom in again. So let's say, brooch stop is one that is fairly common in Kilkenny. If I tick that, it'll only show the brooch stops. And you can already see, so there's quite a few buildings here, not all buildings, some are just gates that have chamfer stops. But if I apply the filter for brooch stops, you'll see it's only St. Canice's Cathedral and one in Roadhouse. And if I zoom out more, a lot of them will be on churches because those are structures I've looked at. There aren't an awful lot of merchant houses surviving, for example. So a lot of them are going to be at churches, but I think that's okay. Or if I look at diagonal cut, see we have a few in Callan, they're all in windows. A lot in Roadhouse, windows and doors. And sometimes they're just, this one for example, is just an architectural fragment that was in storage and I could just see it lying in the shelf there. So I've added that. It's out of context, unfortunately, but you know, at least we have that information that there was, because that's the only one with the diagonal cut at St. Mary's. But we know that at some point they had some building part that had a diagonal cut stop on it, no longer surviving any other ones. But here, for example, diagonal cut or spear, that is, I think that's the fireplace in Kilkenny Castle, where the fireplace is blocked up and all I could see is the front. I'll show you the 3D. So you see the fireplace is blocked up, unfortunately, and you can see it's definitely going up diagonally into the chamfer, and it is probably a spear stop or a pyramid stop, but I can't quite say, and it wasn't really much better in real life. So there will always be some of those cases where I don't really know. So that's the filter for stop shape, and then can filter by whether they have a bar or not. I'm not sure that makes any difference. That's just, even the same pillar in St. Canice's Cathedral, which might have 4 brooch stops, some will have bars and some won't, and I don't see no sense nor reason why. It might just be that the stonemason wanted to show he could do chamfer stops with and without. I don't know. Maybe there were apprentice pieces. I haven't a clue. So we have lots of door types, a couple of different things in the window. Won't go into that. Some sedilias, not a lot, and some piscinas, again not a lot, but I'm only starting. Then I could filter by building level. Most of them will obviously be on the ground floor, because not a lot of first and second floors are accessible or surviving. And then the different building types. But what might be more interesting is the tool marks. So a lot of them are going to be worn, weather worn, or otherwise damaged or even painted over. So I can't see the tool marks, but where I can see them, I will add it. And then you can, for example, go by diagonal tooling, and all the only ones that I have are broach stops that have diagonal tooling. I don't know, punch dressed. I don't know if that is a trend, or if it's just I don't have a lot of. It should show me how many there are actually. I thought it would show me. Yeah, so 7 out of 290. So 7 of the chamfer stops have punch dressing. Where are we? Yeah. 4 have diagonal tooling. So that's not really, can't really make a judgment on that from 4 out of 290. But I think it's worth recording where I can see the tool marks, what they are. And then the SMR number, that's not really a lot of much point in filtering by that. I don't know really why I added that, because that's just going to show you all stops on the same building basically, or on the same structure. Maybe I'll delete that again. And the Wikidata is kind of the same as well. So that is my work in progress database on chamfer stops. I'm hoping to go to Jerpoint next week, Jerpoint Abbey, and maybe take a trip to Dublin, look at Christchurch Cathedral, and if I can get access to any other buildings of the time. A lot of them are of course Church of Ireland, which are not necessarily accessible, or they might be OPW and the season is nearly over, so that's time's running out. But that's what I'm working on, and if you find it interesting or you have any suggestions or criticism, please put it in the comments. If you want to help, send me pictures. You can do that. I'm a bit hesitant to put my email address or anything in a video, but chances are you know me anyway, so just contact me the regular way. But you know what kind of information I need in addition to the pictures. There's not really much point sending me a picture without any context. So you've seen all the things I need to know. You would have to add that information. I don't know if I will make a form online at some point, but I'm not really expecting a lot of enthusiasm of helping me anyway, so I don't really want to waste my time trying to create a form for that and then never get any information. Like I could use that time more wisely. But maybe you found this interesting. You could also just upload them to Wikimedia and tag them. So if you upload an image, and Wiki Loves Monuments is on at the moment as well. If you go, you can put the information in the description and in the caption, but you can also use, I should delete that because that is wrong. I thought they were keel stops, but they're actually not. So this one actually you can see the diagonal tooling really nice. I think that's the one in Kells. So some of the file names are wrong because I was only starting out and I couldn't find the information anywhere of what to call them. So some of the names are still wrong or don't follow my standard now. Let's put it that way. Yeah, so you can put that in the structure data, and then there's also categories. Mostly for County Kilkenny because that's where I've been working. I have a couple for Tipperary as well because I've been to Clonmel and Carrick-on-Shore. Yeah, but you would still have to let me know where they are because I don't really have an alert set up to, you know, when a new image is uploaded to Wikimedia to tell me there's a new broach stop image there for me to add to my database or something like that. But I haven't Googled, I don't use Google anyway, but I'm just using the verb loosely. I haven't searched online for chamfer stops now since I have started the project, so I don't know if there's a huge change in the search results. Before there weren't really a lot because, as I said, not a lot of research has been done, not a lot of information is available online, and even books are not very, like, I've looked at architectural books, they're barely mentioned at all. And if they are, like, I found one German dictionary which had a couple of illustrations of them, but no names with it. The same H.G. Leask, who wrote this book about, is it called Irish Churches in the 1970s, I think. He has illustrations of about 5 of them, and he has not numbers, letters with them, but he never names them. I don't know if I'm supposed to say, okay, it's a Leask type A or whatever. So it's not super helpful. And it's a tiny bit of these 2 volumes. So I wouldn't refer to it. And he has mentioned some, or he has illustrated them, but he hasn't really said much about it as far as I'm aware. If I'm missing a huge publication about chamfer stops, please let me know as well. I don't want to give the wrong impression here about the state of research, but I had asked a couple of archaeologists before I started, or when I had barely started, if they knew of anyone, and they all said no, nobody's done that before. And maybe there's a good reason, I don't know. But anyway, this is what I'm doing now for another while, and we'll see where it gets me, and if I can fill the map a bit more with colour and information, and hopefully there'll be some way to publish it, you know, to be useful to other people. And yeah, just keep an eye out. Like, there's structures in Kilkenny that I've walked past hundreds of times, and they have chamfer stops, and I never noticed it. But it's, yeah, if you sharpen your senses to these kinds of things, you'll see them more. As usual, as is the effect of knowing me, suddenly you see jotted stones and benchmarks and whatever everywhere. But that's the effect I have on people, which is hopefully good. Thanks for watching, and see you again maybe soon. We'll see. Slán go fóill.